going to be a few sad days for Conservatives following their underperformance in Canada's recent federal election on April 28th. And even though I'm much happier with Mark Carney as Prime Minister, with other elections I have felt that utter disappointment that Conservatives are feeling now. Many Conservatives can't stand where Canada is headed and don't understand why everyone doesn't agree with their point of view. It's time for all of us to talk about what comes next. For Conservatives, what do they need to change so that they have a shot at winning the next election? And for all of us, do we want to be an energy superpower like Prime Minister Carney touted during the campaign? Or do we want to take a more sensible, climate-friendly approach and not waste tens of billions of taxpayer money on new pipelines? That's what this video is about. It's a wish list for what the new Liberal government will do, and it's also some advice for the Conservative Party if they want to someday win another federal election. So, we have a new-ish Prime Minister who has dispensed with a third leader of the Conservative Party since the horrible Stephen Harper era ended. Justin Trudeau defeated Andrew Scheer in 2019, and then Aaron O'Toole in 2021. And now the not-so-popular populist Pierre Poilievre was denied both the big job and the seat he's held for 20 years. I'll admit a small part of me does feel bad for Poilievre. On April 28th, he got fired from the only job he's ever really had. Knowing that you are not well liked has got a sting for Poilievre, and I know how he feels about not being liked. Just look at the comments section of any of my videos. But with time and therapy, it'll be okay. For me and Poilievre. And on the victorious side of the House of Commons, we have Prime Minister Mark Carney, whose Liberal Party won 169 seats, just shy of a majority. Now, it's time to get back to work. For the Conservatives, there's some work within their own party they need to take care of first. Do they want to ever win another election in Canada? If they do, here is one biased Liberal's advice on how they could move forward. As they rebuild for the next election, they really need to think hard about how the cuts they love to make to social spending impacts the people who have the least in Canadian society. Conservatives need to be nicer, be more positive, show a willingness to work with others. Conservatives need to stop the slide into becoming even more Trump-like. Poilievre threatened to target and defund Canadian universities engaged in woke ideology and science. He threatened to deport students engaged in protesting the Israeli government's genocide in Gaza. He threatened to use the notwithstanding clause to impose his view of justice. Who does this sound like? During the election campaign, Poilievre said he wasn't like Trump, but he sure sounds an awful lot like him. Canadians were right not to elect enough Conservatives to put Poilievre in the Prime Minister's office. But even though he lost his seat, demonstrating the downside of supporting the trucker occupation in Ottawa and generally being incredibly caustic, he is still around for now, and the danger of him someday gaining power is still very real. We do not have to end up like the US, but I am really afraid that if Poilievre gets back into Parliament and happens to win next time, that's exactly where we would go. There was an article in Maclean's April 10th, 2025 that talks about how Canadians have rejected the populism of the US. Poilievre obviously didn't read that article, but you should. There's a link in the description. Poilievre is viscerally partisan. He doesn't discuss ideas or try to persuade people with reasonable arguments. He acts like he has all the answers, and he's always had them. Everything is right or wrong, win or lose. He has all the nuance of bleach. What else do Conservatives need to change? Well, they need to get a climate change plan. I know Conservatives don't give a crap about climate change, at least that's the impression they've left on me and anyone else who listens to what they say. But Conservatives do care about winning, something they'd like to do a lot more of next time around. Our climate is getting destroyed, and with each passing year, it's going to get worse. If Conservatives don't have a credible climate change plan by the time we have another federal election in Canada, they shouldn't bother running in that election. It is going to be the only thing anyone is talking about. And I don't mean some bullshit plan about selling more methane gas to developing countries. That's not a climate change plan. That's just hoping to get rich selling more gas. More about that in a minute. How do Conservatives get there? Well, they've got to ditch Pierre Poilievre as leader. Find someone within the party, if there is anyone, who may actually appear reasonable to Canadians who are concerned about real issues, not things like eliminating woke ideology and science. Stop with all the Trump talk. That is not who we are in Canada. As for the Liberal government with Mark Carney as Prime Minister, there are a few conflicting things talked about during the campaign that have me concerned. The whole thing about becoming an energy superpower, but diversify our economy away from the US, who happens to be our biggest customer for oil, but have a good plan to fight climate change. Those things don't line up. There are already lots of producers of fossil oil and methane gas in the world. It's projected that we'll reach the peak of global oil and gas demand by 2029. That's 4 years from now, after which demand will gradually or maybe quickly start to fall. There was an article on Bloomberg just last week, April 22nd, that talked about oil and gas being a sunset industry, managing a long-term, if occasionally profitable, decline. In 2023, a large industry player scrapped plans for a gas pipeline and terminal in eastern Canada because they concluded there is no business case for it. They won't make any money from it. Where is the compelling business model for expansion of the fossil oil and methane gas industry in Canada? What's the point in spending, $40 billion on an eastern pipeline that will take 10 years to build when Canadian taxpayers are never going to get our money out of the last pipeline we built for Alberta? The oil and gas industry knows this. That's why they're not going to put any of their money into it. How about we square up the conflicts in the Liberals' direction? Don't put another dime of taxpayer money into pipelines. Call the oil and gas industry's bluff. Tell them they can build a pipeline, but they have to completely pay for it themselves. That would be the best way for it to never get built, because they sure as hell aren't going to use their money on a dog project like a pipeline in a declining market. We can ensure we're self-reliant to a sensible degree for our energy use, and look for ways to reduce our use of this polluting crap through a workable climate change plan. During the campaign, Mark Carney proposed a national energy grid. There's a great article on this idea in Canada's National Observer. That would insulate us from external market shocks from autocrats near and far. And it could be paid for by stopping all subsidies to the oil and gas sector. Us taxpayers gave them $24 billion last year. And as a last nugget to think about, there was another article in Canada's National Observer, April 23rd, that initially gave me a migraine, suggesting that Mark Carney scrapped the emissions cap, but at the same time raise the industrial carbon tax for high polluters like the oil and gas industry. The article makes some interesting points about that, and I think it actually is an idea worth considering. As for the US, they are a completely unreliable trading partner, so sure, sell them oil, but don't think that market is going to expand. They've said they don't need us. They violate agreements when it suits them. Let's move on from relying on that. And as for the rest of the Liberals' agenda, sounds good. Helping Canadians live more satisfying and comfortable lives without sacrificing those at the bottom. I am all for that. So, that's it for the advice. If Conservatives keep Poilievre as their leader and he manages to slink back onto the floor of the House of Commons through some safe by-election, I don't have a lot of optimism they'll be able to shift their strategy to address the things that matter most to Canadians, rather than just giving their more radical base supporters more rage. But who am I? I'm certainly no expert, just a reasonable Canadian who cares about the country moving in a direction that makes a better life for everyone. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching, and thank you for not voting Conservative. Good job.